All right, I'm going to start this video off by saying please comment. The comments help the video, so either good or bad, it might help somebody in a situation. So please comment on this and like or share. So anyway, I want to talk to you guys about a problem that many people have had. In fact, I've had many years ago. And in fact, today, even now, I end up fixing it for other people. Because I actually paint in the sign business. And some people say, well, the sign business doesn't have the same paints as cars. Well, I'm going to tell you differently. Sign paint and car paint are very much the same. There's very slight differences in the fact that everything is catalyzed with sign paint. So your base coats are catalyzed, your clear coats catalyzed. In fact, a lot of times I use standard automotive clear over the catalyzed base coat. So it's, I'll use the universal clear automotive paint over the base coat. So it's basically the same material. So we have the same problems as automotive does. I painted hundreds and thousands of cars, probably close to 1,000 cars when I was a car painter many years ago. And I don't do that now for a living because I just can't stand people that pick apart little stupid little things. And doing that kind of work every day just to me is just very irritating. You guys who do it, go for it. Keep doing it because I don't want to do it. So anyway, let's talk about a problem that many of you guys have had, which is you forgot to put the catalyst in your paint or primer. Okay, so we're going to first talk about primers. Primers typically you can solve this problem pretty easily by let's say you go through, you prime it, and you figure out by touching the primer that it's not dry and it's been on there for several hours, and you realize, oh my God, I didn't put the catalyst in it, or I didn't put the hardener in it. Typically, what you can do is if it's still sticky, then it's still open, so you don't need to really sand it. You can actually just go over the existing primer with another coat of primer that has catalyst in it. Now, again, by the book, what you're supposed to do is strip everything off. So I'm just telling you that if you want to try and get out of a pinch and try and get out of something, then this has worked. It's not the recommended way to fix it. But I've had to do it for other people. Many years ago, I did it for myself, and I just don't do it now. So don't make that mistake. Put the hardener in your material. But if you just happen to do it, so on the primer again, if it's still sticky on the surface, go over it again with extra catalyst in the material. Typically, what will happen is the top coat will actually penetrate through all the coats of material and dry it out all the way through. Now, it's probably going to take a little bit of additional time for that to happen. So you might have to wait an extra day or two before you can sand it. Polyester materials, it works really well if you're using a polyester primer, that if you've had that happen, this is actually a pretty good solve for that. Okay, it's just about fail-proof every time. But the way you test it is to sand all the way through and make sure that it penetrated all the way through the undercoats that were not catalyzed. So you want to make sure that it sanded all the way through those things. So I usually sand off everything that I did and make sure that it was okay, and then reprime again. But you can't sand it off when it's sticky. So the only thing you can do is solvent wash it. So it's actually an easier fix to try and catalyze what you've got and sand it off before you go and do the other, which is solvent wash everything. So that's my first solve for primer. It typically works on most primers, even urethane primer and others. I haven't had that happen with urethane, but I'm sure I've done it with urethane paint and it does work. So single stage urethane. Let's say you did it with single stage urethane. You're going to have to repaint the car. There's no doubt. You're going to have to sand it down and repaint it. But do you want to solvent wash the whole car? And the answer is probably not. And if you just sand it down and then try and recoat over it without trying this, you might have a problem with wrinkling. So if you let it dry, you say, oh, I'll just let it dry longer and I'll just go ahead and just do a full regular paint job over that. Because you're putting so many coats on, you're probably going to have the undercoat not dry as fast as what's on the top. Typically, the top coats will start to penetrate, the hardener will start to penetrate through all the undercoats and actually catalyze them. But what happens is the top coat, because it's really thick and the undercoats are really thick, you're probably gonna have a wrinkling situation. Which you have wrinkling, then you got to strip it. You got to take all the paint off. So here's the solve for a catalyzed urethane single stage paint. This also works for clear. Is to go over, put a little bit of material. So let's say you got a green like this, okay? Put your green base coat or green single stage urethane, mix up additional hardener. So let's say it's a 4-to-1 product. You're gonna go say about 6-to-1, okay? And then you're gonna put additional reducer in the paint, okay? So you're gonna reduce the crap out of it really thin, and then you're just gonna put really, really light coats with very, very, very fast reducer. Make sure it's not slow. And if it's still wet, that's when you wanna, if it's still sticky on the surface, then it's probably open enough for you to be able to do it. But if if it has some sort of a film over it, then you're gonna wanna open up the surface by sanding it with extra, extra fine sandpaper. You know, I'm talking about minimum 600 grit, or even finer, maybe 1,000, or just Scotch-Briting the area to open it up. Okay, so your hardener, so the principle of what you're doing is you're trying to get the hardener to soak through and the reducer to flash off the surface. So you want the hardener to soak into the other paint, okay, but you want the reducer to flash off. Okay, so if the reducer starts to try and dry the paint that's underneath, you're going to have a wrinkling situation. So you want to have a fast reducer and an additional hardener in the paint to help soak into those other coats and actually catalyze them. And I'm going to tell you, I've done this a few times. You know, like I said, I have to fix other people's work. I've done several signs where they've done this, and every time, pretty much, it has worked. It's not 100%. But it's a whole lot easier than just saying, oh, forget it, I'm just going to solvent wipe everything off and start over. Okay, so the same way you do on clear. So clear coat, let's say you forgot to put hardener in it. More often, you're going to have a clear wrinkle than you will a single stage urethane. But when it wrinkles, again, it's got to come off. Got to take everything off. Everything that's wrinkled has to come off. Okay, but it might be easier to remove if that clear is hardened. So, because then you can sand it off with a power sander and it won't load up on your sandpaper as much as trying to solvent wash it all off, and it can be a goopy mess trying to get it off. So on the clear, again, you're gonna have to re-clear it. You're gonna have to repaint it. You're gonna have to do new base coat, new clear coat. It's over. You messed up. Okay, so you're gonna have to repaint the car. But you're going to go through and you put on, you go ahead and put another coat of clear on with additional hardener, the fastest reducer you can put. Do not use acetone. Use only fast reducer. It has to be labeled fast reducer on everything, because acetone will cause it to wrinkle. Any kind of acetone or lacquer thinner, if you're using that as reducer, you're not using the right product. You got to use urethane reducer fast. The stuff you put in your hands that doesn't get cold, okay? Okay, it has to be a good quality reducer, and not your acetone. Does not work. So then you have additional hardener in the next coat. If it's sticky on the surface, you're probably okay to just go over it. If it's got a film over it, if it started to seal up on the surface, you're gonna have to open that up just a little bit with maybe some Scotch-Brite or some really fine sandpaper, and then go over that again with another coat. So how you test it is, again, after you're done, it's hardened up, you let it harden for a few extra days. It's going to take a little bit longer for that hardener to penetrate through the other coats, and it will. It can penetrate through those other coats. Just like as if you, let me give an example. Let's say you've got a can of base coat sitting, or a can of single stage urethane sitting on the shelf, or a can of clear, okay, and you go pour 4, let's say it's 4 to 1, you put 4, 4, or you put 3, even if you put a little less, you put hardener, and you don't stir it, you just put hardener on the top of it. It'll harden the whole can all the way through. I mean, without stirring it up. So it works because paint on the surface is very thin. It can penetrate through all those coats and actually do its job and harden it up. Again, it's not recommended. It's not in any books. This is just painter to painter. This is how you fix it. This is how I've done it before, and I've done it many times over the years, and I've had the actual paint job still last fine that you went over. Okay, so to test it after you're done, so after you go recoat the thing, it doesn't wrinkle, and you let it set for a couple extra days. So now what you want to do is you want to go ahead and sand all the way through your paint job. Go ahead and sand all the way through and make sure that all the coats are dry and it's not loading up on your sandpaper all the way through. So you do your test sanding all over. If you find out that it's okay, go ahead and sand the car down, repaint it, and you're probably going to be just fine. As long as that's how you test it. You sand all the way through all the coats to make sure that it did penetrate and dry out all the other coats. So this is a way that I've gotten myself out of a bind. It's worked, and I've got people out of binds, other people typically, out of binds to try and fix this stuff. And again, sign paint is basically car paint. Some guy says, "Oh, stick to painting signs." It's like, dude, I know what I'm doing. Okay, I've done more types of painting than you have. You've done just cars. So I've done cars, I've done signs, I've done buildings. I do all of it. I do everything. So if you do cars all the time, you're going to know things more in particular about your stuff than I do. But you're probably not going to make the mistake that a home guy is going to make of leaving the hardener out of your paint. So I appreciate all those comments. Please, if you're new to the channel, please comment on this video. People, it'll make it easier for someone to search for it and find it. All right, so please comment if you're just a subscriber on the channel, any kind of comment, hi, whatever. Give it a like, and if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Talk to you guys in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe.